This is your special interview for Morning Wave in Busan. You've probably felt or experienced this. A buzz in your pocket or maybe something like ringing in your purse and you think, oh, maybe there's a message, someone's trying to reach me, and you look at it and the screen is blank. Well, researchers call these phantom communication experiences. And University of Michigan Institute for Social Research scientist Daniel Kruger has linked the frequency of feeling these phantom vibrations to a person's cell phone dependency. To find out more about this issue, we have invited Dr. Daniel Kruger, research professor at the University of Michigan, to speak on this issue. Hi, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Catherine. I'm glad to talk with you.
Yes. So this is such an interesting line of thought. And if you can explain to our listeners what phantom communication experiences are.
Sure. This is when you feel a vibration or you hear ringing or you think you see a notice on your screen. Mm-hmm. And these are the types of messages that they're associated with a message or an incoming call. But then when you check your phone, there's no call or message that actually registered.
Right.
So what this is we think of this as like a signal detection issue. Mm. You have all these different sensations, all these different sounds that you hear in your environment and all these different feelings. And you're trying to detect, okay, is this my phone? Is this my phone? Mm. And this is basically a false positive, right? It's a false positive. You think that there's a message. And the thing is, we tend to have these false positives because we're sensitized to these sensations because they're associated with a reward. Mm. So the stimulus is this message or a call, something that we find rewarding,
yes,
and we're craving this communication, so we're more likely to experience this, and the people who have a greater craving for these communications are more likely to have these phantom experiences.
Well, it seems that your research might be the first study to link these phantom signals straight with, I guess, our psychology. So are these symptoms indicative of cell phone addiction?
Well, there's a big debate about whether this can be called addiction or whether it's just dependency. Mm. And this goes back to technical definitions that arise out of certain schools of psychology called behaviorism. So the psychiatry, they try to distinguish addictions from dependency by saying that addictions are something that's for a rewarding stimulus.
Okay.
Right? So something that's a positive reward. And they say negative reinforcement, which isn't something bad. Negative reinforcement is taking away something bad. It's the removal of an adverse stimulus. That's considered related to dependency, but not addiction. And what they're arguing is that people are feeling, they're feeling left out if they don't get these messages. So this is removing that aversive sensation of not being in touch and being left out. So they're arguing about this right now. So they don't want to call it an addiction, but we definitely think that it's related at least to psychological dependency. I mean, we believe that it has both the positive, rewarding aspects that a positive reinforcer would have, as well as removing negative experiences of not being connected. So we think this is definitely related because people who are psychologically dependent, they become sensitized, okay? So that means they're hypersensitive to stimuli that are like the ones that are rewarding. So if you enjoy getting cell phone messages, if you enjoy getting cell phone calls, then the ringing and the text notification sounds and the buzzing in your pocket, these are things that you're going to be attuned to. You'll be craving them. You'll be looking out for them, and you're more likely to interpret ambiguous sensations as incoming calls or messages.
Well, in terms of your research, if you can explain a little further in detail, how many people were involved in the study, and I hear that the outcomes for, I guess, were a bit different according to gender, men versus women. So if you can explain that also.
Right, yeah, we had 766 participants, and we looked to see if there were gender differences, because we know in general there's gender differences in communication. Women tend to communicate more and such. And what we found was that women reported higher cell phone dependency than did men. So they seem to be more dependent on cell phone communications. And we also found personality variables of conscientiousness and emotional stability that were related to cell phone dependency. But overall, the phantom experiences were most strongly predicted by cell phone dependency rather than the personality factors. So if you look at all the different causes together, what you see is the strongest relationship between the degree to which people are really craving these cell phone calls and messages, the extent to which they're really dependent on their phones, and the likelihood that they're going to have one of these phantom cell phone experiences.
I see. Well, in your opinion, how often might we experience these phantom symptoms or phantom communication experiences to kind of gauge ourselves personally that we might be not necessarily addicted, but at least really, really heavily dependent on our phones?
Right. People had a real range. Some people experienced these multiple times a day. Some people experienced it like once in a month or so.
Yes.
If you're experiencing it fairly often, and especially if this is upsetting to you. So if you think you get a call or a message and you don't get it, and that makes you upset, then it's probably a problem.
So
if it's causing you distress.
If it's causing you distress, so it's not necessarily, whether it's once a month or once a week, but if it really bothers you that you're experiencing this, it might be problematic.
Right. I think people who are experiencing it very, very often, like several times a day, that's also likely indicative of cell phone dependency.
Sure.
But somebody could experience it less often, and if it's a problem, and this is one of the ways that clinicians and psychotherapists thinks about things, is that if it happens and it doesn't bother you, then it's not a problem. But if it bothers you, that's one of the ways it becomes problematic.
Yes. Well, there's this term, nomaphobia, that has even, emerged as a term in the Cambridge Dictionary. What is this term, and why is this pertinent to cell phone usage?
Right. This is an irrational fear of being out of cell phone contact. So people are worried that their battery is going to die or they're going to be out of cell phone range, and this is causing them anxiety. And this could sometimes really happen. So somebody could really have like a low battery, it's at 4% and it's going to die, and they're afraid of this. So, that might also happen. But this is when people are sort of constantly worried that they're going to be out of cell phone contact. And, people believe that this is also a phenomenon indicating things like cell phone dependency as well as general social anxiety and panic. So it's also a phenomenon where, we have this modern technology that might have benefits for us, but it can also lead to problematic issues like this, this fear of what happens if I can't get on my phone.
Right.
Our survey showed that the average participant checked their phone about 100 times a day, 80 to 150 times a day. So this is, these are college students, right? So, these are younger adults. Older people might not do it that often. But, it's just mind-boggling how often people might actually be checking their phones for messages and calls.
Yes, yes. Well, speaking of, people checking their phones very frequently, unlike, I guess, let's say alcohol addiction or maybe even a drug addiction, it seems that people are likely to take this cell phone, whether you call it addiction or dependency, kind of lightly, not take it as seriously. But might that be dangerous if we don't take this serious enough?
I agree with you. I mean, a lot of people don't like to think of things that aren't like a hard substance, like somebody who's addicted to some sort of drug.
Right.
They don't take technology seriously as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is wrong because you can have the same kind of dependency experiences, and you can have all other problematic behaviors associated with technology, just as you would, some sort of illicit substance or alcohol. So this is something that, we want to be able to look at as a potential problem and to see, is this a serious issue? So if someone is not able to disconnect, so if they have this nomophobia, or if they, if you can get them to, walk through the park for an hour without their phone, can they do that? Can they take a walk in nature for an hour without their phone? And how do they feel about that? Some people I know find this really liberating, if they're in an area and they cannot get their cell phone signal because then they know they're not, they're not going to be bothered and they're completely free. But other people, this might be a terrifying experience. They're like, what? How is somebody going to reach me? How am I going to reach them?
Right.
And then I think that's an indication that it's a problem. And also, if our virtual worlds, they do bring us lots of benefits. We can connect to our friends.
Yes.
We can connect to people who share similar interests all over the world. So people who are interested in something very, very specific can find other people who are interested in the same thing that they're interested in, right? So there are benefits to social media, and there are benefits to electronic communication. But if this interferes with our live social interactions, if you go to a restaurant or a bar or a public place and everyone is there sitting on their phones, then, they're not talking to each other. Or if this is interfering with socialization, if people don't know how to socialize in person anymore because they're only used to doing it through their devices, through their screens, this could be problematic as well.
Well, any last words you want to share with our listeners in terms of this? Because I'm sure a lot of people are kind of like thinking about themselves and their behavior. Like I was thinking, just a fleeting thought like, oh my gosh, how many times do I check my phone a day? Any last words you want to share with our listeners?
Try to have a good balance. So you get the benefits, but you don't get so hooked that you can't turn it off.
Yes. Well, I'm certain that our listeners found this interview to be very, very interesting. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this matter.
It was great to talk with you. Take care.
All right. Once again, this was Professor Daniel Kruger, a research professor at the University of Michigan. And I do want to apologize for the quality of the connection with Professor Kruger. It does happen when we try to connect with our experts all around the world. So thank you for understanding. And so let me ask you this, listeners. How often do you think you check your phone? I'm going to think about that too during the song break.